Welcome to the presentation on creative ways for connecting with content. As you can see by Charlie Brown's little thinking cloud, this has a lot to do with how to help your students connect to content in ways that they can understand and enjoy. So what I want to do is help you avoid the feeling that sometimes we can get when our students act like this. As you can see, the teacher was not making herself very well understood, and this was causing a lot of boredom and sleep on the part of our cartoon characters. So what we want to do is think about three things during this workshop. One is teaching for transfer, teaching for comprehensibility, and teaching with interaction, so that our students can end up doing the happy dance instead. Before we get started, I want to ask you a question about how many other languages other than English that you know. Go ahead and place your answers in the survey box. And then we'll go ahead and look at your answers. Well, according to the Ethnologue in 2009, these are the languages with the greatest numbers of speakers in the world at the time that the survey was done, which was 2009. English is now number 3. That's why you have the line there. That is the role for English. If you add in the number of people using English as a second language to the numbers of people speaking English as a native language, you will get almost 2 billion people in the world speaking English. However, the next slide will help you hear a language that is only spoken by little more than 5 million people. It is an indigenous language that was used by about 95% of the people in Paraguay, many of whom are also bilingual with Spanish. So let's take another quick survey. How many of you know Guarani? Let us know if it's yes or no. Now, of course, I'm hoping that you answered no for a very good reason, because in this next video, I'm going to ask you to figure out what is being said in Guarani. Ready? Let's go ahead and go. Okay, so let me know in this next slide what you understood. Did you hear a lot of the wow, wow, wows? If the video had gone on too much longer, I'm afraid you might have been starting to have your attention wander a bit. Now we're going to watch the video again, but this time with a difference, and I want you to let me know what you understood this time. By the way, keep this information in mind. Here's Guarani written for you. See if you can listen to these words in the next slide. So now let's try to figure out what she was saying. What is this lesson about? Is it about evolution, rain, things going up or down, heat and cold, other things? Go ahead and write in your responses. And then we'll look at your combined answers in a little bit. So what did the teacher do to help you understand a little more of what was saying? I bet most of you were thinking that gestures and facial expressions helped to help you figure them out. And you'd be right. But you're still not too sure what the lesson is about. So let's look at the next short video to see if this helps clarify things for you. So what is this lesson about this time? Go ahead and write in what you think it is this time. And then we're going to go ahead and compare the responses. Let's see how much more you understood. What did she do this time? Yes, she used pictures, photos, drawings, and she used real things. That's what we call realia, where you can use your five senses of hearing, tasting, seeing, touching, hearing to make sense of the language that's being spoken. All those things help to help your students understand what it is that you're teaching. So let's look at the answers from the first time with just using gestures and expressions, and now when she used the five senses, the realia, and the visual aids. Let's go ahead and compare. As you can see, you understood much more with the visual aids, but the gestures and the expressions helped as well. Both of these combined are certainly much more helpful than, of course, just speaking. So think about this with your own students. Now, I have another question for you. Which pictures helped you figure out that the lesson was about the water cycle? The ice cube, water, and gas pictures, the cycle, all of the above, or none of the above? We'll be talking a little bit about just about what all people do when they learn a second language and how often we forget about the skill of using what we already know, which is, in our case, the water cycle, and learning the new language. If you answered A, B, or C, you must have known about the water cycle, and you probably learned it in your first language as a child. So in essence, what you did is that you transferred what you knew from your first language and moved it in to your second language, even if it's a second language like Guarani that you most probably have never heard before. In a way, language can be like an iceberg. And anyone who has watched the movie The Titanic definitely knows something particular about icebergs. Yes, there's much more under the water that we don't see than what is on top. Well, learning a language is the same. A limited vocabulary, an accent, and an unnatural pronunciation are what we can definitely spot when someone is learning a new language. But there is so much more under the surface that we forget about. Under the surface are our understandings about how things like language work, the order that words need to follow each other. For example, in English, we know not to say the house red. We say the red house. Under the water, we also hold many, many associations between experiences and words, connections between things we have learned and the language we connected them to. So, for the moment, just think about how a language is like an iceberg. But what happens with people that have two languages? Well, then, we have two icebergs. But the icebergs share the same space under the water. To help you see this better, let's look at the next slide. Here you'll see that the two icebergs have been sort of drawn into a diagram. And the iceberg that has the L1 on it means that that is for language 1, or the first language. And the iceberg that has the L2 on it means that it is the second language. Jim Cummins, a Canadian researcher, presented this idea that is now widely accepted. He took the idea of two icebergs and created a model for the way languages interact with each other for bilingual people. L1 again is the first or the native language, L2 is the second language. The horizontal line is the water. Where the two icebergs combine is where the information from a person's native language mixes with the second language. That's called the common underlying proficiency. This is where you can transfer information that you learned from one language into another. Then all you need is the new vocabulary in the second language, and then you can express what you know in the new language. For those of you that have learned a new language after you were about 9 years old, chances are you didn't need to learn how to read and write all over again in the second language. And that's because your skills transferred. As another example, let's say you already knew how to carry on a debate because you learned it in your first language. That would be already lodged under the water in the common underlying proficiency section. And when you learn the word in the second language, then everything you already knew about debating would transfer to the second language. You do this all the time. This is how pidgins and creoles get started. Many of us have heard languages being mixed, and there was even a movie about it called Spanglish. Spanglish goes something like this. Once upon a time, there was a little mariposita who was gliding through the air. Oops, she dijo, I forgot to open my alitas. Now, even if you don't know Spanish, in your mind, most probably you were able to substitute some of those words. The fact that many of you who are bilingual with English and Spanish understood that means that you're transferring, so to speak, under the water.